This is an Oklahoma Votes election update.
Good evening. The polls are closing across the state right now for the midterm elections.
We have live team coverage on the races for governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and the U.S. House, plus state superintendent and the 5 state questions.
As soon as the election board begins to release results, we will have them at the bottom of your screen on our free News on 6 app and on Facebook Live. We'll be back in about 30 minutes.
This is an Oklahoma Votes election update.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for News on 6's special election coverage of the 2018 midterms. I'm Dave Davis, and you're watching us live on Facebook Live right now and our digital platforms. Thank you so much for joining us in today for, again, the 2018 general election. This is it, the primaries in June. We had the runoffs in August, and here we go. Bill Shepard with SoonerPoll.com joins us once again with his unique perspective, and we've seen this polling all throughout on News on 6 across these last several months. Bill, welcome in. Happy Election Day to you.
Happy to you as well, Dave.
Well, Bill, let's start off by the voter turnout. We just got results from the Tulsa County Election Board as far as their voter turnout estimates. They're saying it's 3/4 of what it would be in a presidential year. Usually they say the midterms are about less than half in a presidential year. So voter turnout, who is that going to favor this evening?
Well, here in Oklahoma, I think that the turnout is high, but I think it's also high for both parties. What I'm seeing in a lot of the early numbers broken down by party is exactly what we saw in 2016, about 51% Republican, 41% Democrat, and 8% independent. And so if that holds true, then we have not only increased Democrat turnout, which we kind of had anticipated, but we also have increased Republican turnout as well to match it. And so it's going to make out for a very interesting evening all the way through and all the way down the ballot as well.
We want to start at the top of the ballot, if you will, with the governor's race. That's the one that many people are watching with 3 candidates. And I mentioned 3 because Chris Powell, as a libertarian, may not have a shot to win it, but do you think that he would pull enough percentage to make a difference in the outcome?
Well, I think he will because we have him polling at around 3%, and the candidates are now within 3 points of each other. Our last poll that we did, exclusive poll for News on 9 and our News 9 and News on 6, showed Kevin Stitt at 47 and Drew Edmondson at 44. And so that's where that extra 3 points is stuck in there. You know, the rest undecided, we saw that they were breaking proportionally for the 3 candidates, so we don't see an advantage of them. But I think it's going to come down to a 51, 52% majority for either candidate at this point. It's going to be very close. In fact, Dave, we have not had a close election like this in more than 16 years. So it's something new for such a red state.
Yeah, and if I remember right, the last governor's election, the voter turnout was not very high, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but it was not very high for the last governor election, and this one is going to be a different ballgame.
That's right. Mary Fallin ran in 2010 against Jerry Askins. Democrats, after having voted in the state of Oklahoma for Barack Obama, we saw a big decrease in Democrat turnout. That helped the Republicans sweep all of the statewide offices. Barack Obama, again, was the gift that kept on giving for Republicans in the state because they got a lot more higher majorities in the House and in the Senate. But now this is a little different. This year it's going to be a little different because we have a lot of people out there, 1 in 10 in my polling, that shows that they're ready for a change at the top. And we think this is a bit of a Mary Fallin effect. But that's the reason why it's so close at the top of the ticket.
I wanted to talk as well, Bill, about the U.S. House races, of course, every 2 years. So all 5 congressional districts are up for re-election in Oklahoma. And across the nation, we're seeing Senate results and House results coming in and talking about the battleground states. In Oklahoma, does the GOP really have anything to worry about as far as U.S. House representation?
Well, Steve Russell, the congressman for the 5th District that takes in mostly Oklahoma City, has gotten on Cook political reports, top lists. It's become a top target even for the Democrats, thinking that they might have an opportunity in that. Keep in mind that the core of Oklahoma City and the core of Tulsa are slowly turning blue, like we see in Texas, for example, a sea of red with a few blue dots. Those dots are Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, for example. It's happening here, but happening at just a much slower rate. And so Steve Russell kind of got on that list because he's not a good fundraiser. It's just a district that will probably turn more than any of the others. And so we look for that one to be a closer race, but still I think it's not ready for the Democrats to win this year.
And you're seeing on your screen here, of course, the results haven't come in yet. The polls have been closed for 5.5 minutes, but the results have not come in yet. And of course, as those results start coming in from the precincts, we will post those results. But you're seeing all 3 of the Tulsa area House races, District 1, 2, and 3 up there on your screen as well. I wanted to talk about the state questions, of course. There's 5 state questions. Some of them, voting today, some of them are quite long, and you have to get a good read in there to get them all down. Do you think that any of them will be confusing for voters? I mean, how do you think these state questions are going to break out? And let's start off with 793, which we have seen, I think, the most advertising dollars, the optometry law. How is this all going to shake out with 793?
Well, 793 doesn't solve any kind of social ill, really. It's a battle. It's a fight between 2 people in the private sector. It's a fight between Walmart and the optometrists in the state of Oklahoma. And so I think voters are a little bit confused as to, okay, I got to pick a side, and why do I need to pick a side and vote on that? I think that you allude to the ballot language. It is very confusing, not only for that question, but for the others. And then, of course, if you'll notice on the ballot, it'll say state question 793, but it's petition initiative 174 or something like that. I mean, my question is, could they make it any more difficult or any more confusing? The ballot language is already enough confusing for most voters. So yeah, there's a lot of people that can change their mind at the last moment on ballot questions, and that's the reason why in polling we see it change quite a bit, particularly in the last month.
I wanted to also ask about the state question that's dealing with the governor and lieutenant governor ticket, making them on one ticket. It's state question 798. Now, we had talked about a couple months ago about how Oklahomans like to decide on things. We like to vote on everything right when we go to the polls. So 798, do you see a way forward for that, combining it into one ticket?
Yeah, at this point, that's probably the only thing holding it back, because people in Oklahoma like to vote. We're very pragmatic. We want to vote for sheriff. We want to vote for district attorney. And so that particular question of marrying that together takes away their right to pick that. But I think that there is some very good reasons why that is a good deal for some of those support voters, is because they see it as an opportunity to not just have the lieutenant governor just kind of be a fifth wheel, so to speak, of government and not really have any defined duties. And so this is an opportunity to put to work that person who can work in a conjunction with that elected governor, be on the same ticket, be on the same party, and be able to be more effective as a two-man or two-woman team than to be two different people with two different responsibilities.
Yes, Bill, we wanted to show folks at home as well some of the other state questions, 794, which is MARSY'S law, as well as state question 800, state question 801, and MARSY'S law. Any idea where Oklahomans will be leaning on 794 with MARSY'S law?
Right. It's a runaway, really. We didn't find very much opposition to MARSY'S law at all whatsoever. Again, it gives rights to victims of a crime, just so that the person that's convicted of the crime has rights. They want to make sure that victims have rights as well, or defined rights. And so really there's nobody that disagrees with that. Everybody seems to be, both Republicans and Democrats alike, seem to be on board with that one.
And Bill, you know, I've kind of led it along here with asking you about races. Is there a race maybe we haven't talked about that could turn out to be very interesting this evening? Again, we've talked about governor, we've talked about the House races. Are there some that you are really looking at and kind of the angle that you're looking to see which way we go?
Well, I'm going to be looking at some House races and some Senate races. I'm going to be looking at some that the Democrats won in the special elections that were really Republican seats, and can the Republicans win those back? I'm going to be looking at some urban seats, predominantly 2 in Oklahoma City, for example, I can think of, that are beginning to turn more and more blue, and the Democrats have an opportunity to win those for the first time in a long time. And then if there is a lot of Republicans, even in rural areas, that begin to get into trouble, then we might have a little bit of sweep the incumbents out sort of mentality tonight. So that's, I think, another thing to look for. But certainly the House is not going to change in hands tonight. The Republicans are going to remain firmly in control of the State House and the State Senate. But the Democrats might be able to claim victory if they win some of these seats that maybe the Republicans got overextended on during the Obama years.
All right. Well, Bill Shepard with SoonerPoll.com. Thank you so much for your time, Bill. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave.
And so, again, we're seeing races all up and down the ticket. The ballot that I voted on, for example, front and back, very long, a lot of things to decide on, even down to judgeships. We have state Supreme Court, civil appeals, criminal appeals, and things like that. So we can go through some of the races now, I think, and we can start off with the governor's race. Of course, at the top, Republican Kevin Stitt against Democrat Drew Edmondson, and then also Libertarian Chris Powell is running in that as well. And as we were hearing Bill talk about with SoonerPoll.com, the polling very close. It was tightening. It was a 5-point lead for Stitt just a couple weeks ago. And then the most recent poll that was released, I believe on Friday, showed a 3-point gap with Chris Powell, again, polling in about 3% in that poll. So that could be a deciding factor there as well. And a certain percentage are also undecided. But Bill Shepard was thinking that the winner in this race would get over 50%. Also, the lieutenant governor race. The lieutenant governor race, there's 2 on this. It's the Republican Matt Pinnell, Democrat Anastasia Pittman, and I'm sorry, a third, independent Ivan Holmes. Anastasia Pittman, a state senator. And so this is something that we've seen Matt Pinnell vote today, as well as Miss Pittman. So that is one more race for you there. Another race that we want to talk to you about, the Attorney General race. And this is something that we've seen a Republican incumbent, in fact, Attorney General Mike Hunter. We've seen him all over TV doing a lot of advertisement, and we haven't heard much, especially in the Tulsa area, from the Democratic candidate, Mark Miles. He is an Oklahoma City attorney. We did see him vote in some of our footage that we showed in the 5 and 6 o'clock newscasts. But this is interesting because Mike Hunter, again, the incumbent, won a very tooth and nail first primary, then runoff with Gentner Drummond. And so he is still spending all kinds of advertising dollars, it appears, running into the general election. And let's pull up the next race here, and I'm looking for it. I'm sorry, I don't remember which one's the next one. There we go, the state superintendent. So the state superintendent, we have Joy Hoffmeister at the top. She is the Republican incumbent here. We have John Cox is the Democrat, and he is also the PEGS superintendent. So he's the Democratic challenger. And then interestingly, the independent here, Larry Huff, he has thrown his support behind John Cox and in fact endorsed John Cox in that race. The next race that we have up on the ballot here, and again, there's a lot of them to get through, but this is going to be the U.S. House District 1, and this is going to cover Tulsa, Wagner, Washington County, and parts of other counties. Republican Kevin Hern versus Democrat Tim Gilpin. The incumbent here was Jim Bridenstine, but of course he left to become the NASA administrator, a job that he's doing right now. So businessman Kevin Hern and Tulsa attorney Tim Gilpin squaring off in this U.S. House District 1 that again encompasses mostly Tulsa. That's kind of the central city in that district. And the next, we want to show the U.S. House District 2. And this is House District 2, where it's a crowded field. Mark Wayne Mullen, as Bill Shepard was saying, is the heavy favorite here. He's the incumbent Republican. Jason Nichols, Tahlequah mayor, he's also in the mix. Richard Castaldo, who says he's a street pastor and political activist. He is the Libertarian candidate, and there's also an independent candidate here, John Foreman, who is a manager with call centers and plasma centers. And that House District 2 is an expansive district, goes from northeast Oklahoma down to southeast Oklahoma, a big chunk of eastern Oklahoma. We also want to show you the U.S. House District 3. This is the biggest district we have in Oklahoma. From the Panhandle, it touches Tulsa, it goes down to Southwest, and Frank Lucas, the multi-time incumbent, he's held this this district, I believe, since 2003, and he's running against Frankie Robbins, the Democrat who has run several times and been defeated by Frank Lucas in that district. So let's go now to News on 6's Lori Fulbright, who is live at Kevin Stitt's watch party in Oklahoma City. Lori?
Dave, well, people are now really starting to pour in here and fill this room up. This is going to be the watch party, not just for Kevin Stitt, but all the Republican candidates tonight at the Bricktown Event Center. So it's going to be a pretty big event and pretty crowded here. So we just talked to Kevin Stitt's people a minute ago, and he and his family are not expected to arrive here until the race has been called. And they didn't really define what that means. You know, who calls it? He calls it, the media calls it, but they said it's not for any other reason than just logistics, because of course he's got a big family and he's got a lot of people with him, and so there's just not enough room here, they say. So we don't expect to see him until the race is called, and as you know, we're expecting this to be a pretty close race throughout the night, so I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work or how late that might be, but once the race is called, then we expect him to arrive here. I did just talk to several of his employees, and they told me that he chartered a bus and brought those employees who wanted to come over to the watch party. So dozens of them just got off the bus a moment ago that he had chartered for them, and they are now here showing their support for their boss as well. So we expect this to, progress throughout the evening, of course, as those numbers come in, but don't expect to see the candidate mingling here with people before that race is called. We won't see him until that moment. Dave?
Yeah, and it was interesting, Lori. We saw him vote this morning, and you had mentioned it earlier. It was his daughter's first time to vote as well.
Yeah, that was so cute. So, of course, he said, it's a special election because he's running for governor. But to him, as a father, he said it was really special because his oldest daughter is now legal to vote. And so that she got to vote in her very first election. And how special is that her father is on the ballot. Of course, he joked with us after he voted and said, he checked her ballot to make sure she voted for the right candidate. But he was joking about that. But he did take his family with him. And one of the things I love that I've been seeing all over Facebook today is how many people took their kids to the polls, and how many kids were asking questions about why did you vote for this person and how did you decide this, and what a great thing to be teaching that democratic process to the next generation. So I think that's been a really cool thing. Of course, he's had his children very involved in his campaign, as you've seen on many of his ads, and at the last watch party, because it was just for him, one of the most fun things was to watch all the bloopers from those commercials when they were shooting with his kids. But of course, tonight the watch party is for all the Republicans, so we won't see that here tonight, but we do expect his entire family to be with him when he arrives here later this evening. Dave?
All right, Lori Fulbright again, thank you so much from Oklahoma City at the GOP headquarters there, where there's going to be a watch party for all the Republican candidates tonight. And of course, many candidates are running, again, both Democrat, Republican, and Oklahoma's newest recognized party, the Libertarian Party. And you've been seeing our graphics, and we've been putting them up for you today and this evening. Of course, 0%, so none of the precincts have reported yet. It's still 17 after, 18 after. Polls just closed at 7. So again, as soon as these results come in, we will start showing them to you here on Facebook Live, as well as our News on 6 app. We have the election results ticker at the top, and you can click on that and check on all the races. And now, just as I say that, we do actually have some results just coming in for governor, and these are absentee results. A huge absentee turnout. Look at this, almost 100,000 people voting absentee. So that's why it says that 0% precinct, because these are absentee. But in absentee voting, again, almost 100,000 ballots returned. Drew Edmondson leads in absentee voting 50% to 47%, and Libertarian Chris Powell picking up 2%. And looking at the vote totals, you've got already 44,285 votes in for Drew Edmondson, over 41,000 votes in for Republican Kevin Stitt, and over 2,100 votes in for Libertarian Chris Powell. Powell. We also saw another 50,000 who early voted, so those will be interesting to see as well. These are the absentee ballots that were returned for lieutenant governor. And on the Republican side, Matt Pinnell, the man we expect to be the front runner in this race, he is up 54% to 43% over Anastasia Pittman. So his vote total about 47,000, Anastasia Pittman's 37,000, and then independent Ivan Holmes picking up 3%. And we're watching for these independents. We're watching for these libertarians, especially in the governor's race, is if it's going to be that close. We saw in the governor's race earlier, 3 percentage point difference. You'll notice libertarian Chris Powell picking up about 3%. That could be a big difference maker. Now the attorney general, these are absentee ballots. Again, that's why it says 0% at the bottom, 0% precincts, but in absentee voting, big numbers we're seeing. Mike Hunter, 56%. Democrat Mark Miles, 44%. And again, almost 50,000 people voted for Mike Hunter, over 38,000 for Mr. Miles. Let's move on to the state superintendent of public education. Again, in absentee voting, we are seeing Republican incumbent Joy Hoffmeister is on top of John Cox, 54% to 40%, and also topping Larry Huff. And Larry Huff is pulling in the most votes that we've seen out of any independent or third-party candidate at this point. So we will get it back to you now. We're going to have another TV update for you on election results, and then I'll be back on Facebook Live after that. Thank you for watching News on 6's coverage of the 2018 midterms. We'll be right back.